and then I use an extra microphone. So,
Okay. I've been looking at the podcast and your website, but my Swedish is very poor. Sorry about that.
I understand. It's a podcast about stress and
Yeah.
burnout. And so I have had this podcast for 8 years, actually,
Yeah.
spreading the word about or knowledge about stress. But it's just for Sweden.
And have you had them in English before?
Yeah, I have. I have, even though I speak English quite a lot with my family, and it's another thing having an interview in English. It's a bit harder because when you speak with your family or friends, you speak about what you're comfortable with, but
Yes.
it's another thing. But I want to go abroad, so this is a good chance.
Well, and your English is very good. So,
Oh,
so yeah. So as long as that's okay, then great. Thank you.
thank you, thank you. I have some question for you, and if this would be in Swedish, I wouldn't reading them, but sometimes I will look at my questions because it's another thing. Let us start. Welcome to Prestationpodden, Stefan.
Oh, thank you so much. Such a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Can you start sharing a bit about yourself and why you created Sensate?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I've got a background in meditation and relaxation practice. So my father taught me and my brother to meditate when I was very young. So I've been meditating for about 55 years or so. And so naturally, that's informed really pretty much everything I've done going forward. So when I started practicing medicine about 35 years ago and formed a new medicine group in Harley Street in London, breathing, relaxation, meditation, and stress management was a big focus for what I did. And I've been using sound and vibration frequency in my practice for many, many decades. And that's kind of evolved, really. It sort of started with putting speakers under the pillow to connecting speakers to the couch. And eventually evolved into what we now call the Sensate device, which is really the idea that rather than it's a technology that anyone can use at home or anywhere else to receive the benefits of meditation-like practices. And in particular, this is because what I noticed in clinic is there was a really sharp decline in the average person's ability to follow a meditation or breathing practice. So whereas 15 years ago or so, I could give people, even very stressed out city executives or whatever, I could give them like a 45-minute practice and say, go and do this for a month and then come back. It became, over the years, people's ability to stay with a practice really declined. So people would come back and they'd say, oh, I tried that exercise and, I tried the 10-minute version and I was just looking at my watch and wondering when it was going to finish and thinking about all the things I had to do. And in fact, with breathing, it was even more the case. What I found is that a lot of people are what we call chronic hyperventilators. So they have low CO2 and they don't notice this. But they notice it when you get them to direct their attention to their breathing. So if somebody is breathing irregularly or in an imbalanced or hyperventilating kind of way, if you say to them, now notice your breathing, what they tend to do is breathe even worse because they become hyper aware of their breathing. So the point is, as Andrew Huberman at Stanford says, you can't use the mind to control the mind. And I think that's really the blocker to relaxation and breathing and meditation, and for many of us, because we're so in our minds, we're so preoccupied, we're so busy that we think we can use willpower and the mind to calm down, but in fact you can't. So the whole point really is to have something which is like a teacher, but which you can use and access at any time.
Okay, I study breath work for the moment. I think that is an easier way to relax. Actually, if you, I've been meditating for many years, but it's easier for me to follow the breath, and it's like a training sort of more than just sit there.
Yeah, I mean, of course, every meditation, uh, prayer, whatever you want to call it, system
Mm.
in the world uses.
Oops, no worry. I can take. I can redo. Uh,
So,
no, no, no.
yeah, I thought that was on silent. Do you want to ask
Yeah.
that? Say that again, and
No,
and I'll ask it
exactly.
again. Yeah.
I am I study breathwork for the moment to become a breathwork instructor, and I think breathing is an easier way than just meditating to get the body to relax, because it's like you exercise sort
Mm.
of. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we don't say enough about meditation is how difficult it is.
mm,
Because, in a way, you're being asked to do something incredibly simple. You're being asked to do nothing. So,
exactly.
so what could be simpler than doing nothing? But in fact, it's incredibly difficult to do nothing. So every meditation system, of course, uses breathing as the focus for our attention, because breathing is the only automatic function which we have voluntary control over.
Yeah.
So, it's very hard to control your heartbeat or your blood pressure or your gut motility, but anyone can control their breathing. Instantly they can just stop breathing, or they can breathe harder or faster. But what we found in clinical practice is that a very, very high percentage of people, I mean, like 85% or so of people, are what we call over breathing.
Mm.
So they're actually breathing in more than they're breathing out.
Oh, I think that's me.
Well, and
uh,
the problem with this is that's really an overhang from our beautiful and fantastically adapted evolutionary survival mechanisms.
mhm.
So the inhalation process is about activating muscles for action. So you inhale in, and you hold the breath in the upper chest here, and you become more alert, and blood goes to your muscles, it goes away from your organs, it also goes away from your brain. And when you breathe out, it's the so it's that breathing out, the expiration process, which activates the rest and digest, the tend and befriend response,
Yes.
which is really the part of the nervous system we're trying to activate.
Mm.
And certainly what we noticed in clinic is that when people are somewhat stuck in an inhalation process, it's very difficult for them to learn how to breathe out. What
I
what
guess.
ten, what often tends to happen is you say, okay, make your breath a bit longer, and they after a few seconds, they become breathless, and they need to gasp, and try and catch up. But this is an incorrect message, because of course, you could be put into, let's just imagine, without triggering anyone, you could have all the air removed from a room, and you wouldn't you'd be okay. You wouldn't enjoy
Mm.
it, but you'd be okay for 5 minutes or longer. But your brain tells you after maybe only 5, 6, 10, 15 seconds of not inhaling that you need to breathe in.
Mm.
So it's a misfiring of the information, because you don't need to breathe in, not physiologically, but your body tells you, your brain, your nervous system tells you that you do need to breathe
Mm. And I got curious when you talk about this. What do you call it? The sound. You worked with sound
in.
to heal people, or how is that working?
Well, sound is very primal. So there's a lot of anthropological evidence now that we sang before we talked. That we can, obviously, human beings, all animals, all mammals have communicated with sound for millions of years. And we're programmed at a deep, deep cellular level to respond positively to nature sounds. So, for instance, not that long ago, a couple of thousand years ago, let's say, when people would have been much more likely to be sitting in tribal type environments, maybe around a campfire, maybe hunting, we would have had a relationship with sounds in nature, particularly, say, birds. So you might know birds have several different sounds they make.
Mm-hmm.
Mating calls, of course, alarm calls when they see a predator and they can communicate with each other, and then their general sort of relaxed kind of chirpy call. And it's quite possible be able to notice the difference. So a bird up in the tree is able to see a predator long before a group of humans on the ground is. So we would have had a relationship with nature sounds with birds that when they started making an alarm call, we knew there was a predator nearby. And so we would have become activated. We would have moved into that emergency response. And there are similar examples of that throughout every aspect of nature, including the smell and the sound in the trees and the sound of water. So human beings are deeply programmed to respond in a particular way to natural sounds in nature, which is why it's so important to hear nature sounds, but also to be in nature itself. And human beings have also used sound, particularly to make the chest resonate
Mm-hmm.
for a very long time. Whether it's humming. I mean, everybody hums in the shower, right? And we know that feels good. We know that humming makes us feel good, and anybody can hum, even if you don't have a singing voice, you can hum. But also we've developed omming and mantra and prayer, and various rhythms and drumming, etc., and singing, of course, to make the chest resonate. So there is something very primal and very deeply embedded in our well-being mechanisms that tells us when the throat and the chest are humming and resonating, that our nervous system, our autonomic nervous system, of which the largest branch is the vagus nerve, and it runs just the branch we're interested in runs just behind the sternum bone here. That humming and resonating activate in a very positive way this nervous system response.
It's so interesting. Can you explain more what the vagus nerve is and what it's good
Yeah.
for?
So the vagus nerve has been around for certainly since there were bony fish. So
Mm-hmm.
somewhere between 5 and 800 million years, which is a long time. So
Yeah.
the early parts of the brainstem and the vagal nerve canal have been present from then. They've obviously evolved, and about a million, and up to mammals becoming simians and apes and then humans. And the vagus nerve has become more elaborate and more refined over that process. So we only really developed what you might call a higher brain, a human brain, about 1 million years ago, which sounds like a long time, but compared to, say, 500 million years, it's a blink of the eye. And we've only really had, in the last period, since industrialization, what we might call modern society, and we've only had for a couple of decades, if that, what you might call the information or the digital age. So these few moments, compared to the hundreds of millions of years of evolution that's got us to where we are now, adaptation can't occur at the speed of technological change.
Nej.
So technology and society and culture are changing faster than we can adapt.
Ja,
And
absolut.
the consequence of that, as you know very well, is that people are just overstimulated. And by using sound, we can access these much more ancient parts of our cellular mechanisms to produce natural relaxation. And my hypothesis is that only about half of sound is heard via the ears. So, of course, when we say sound, we tend to think, okay, headphones, ears, but actually there are very sophisticated sound and vibration receptors in the cells and in the body and in the bones, actually. And which is why being at a concert, listening to music on a stereo rather than headphones is a very, very different experience, because it's not just the ears and the brain perceiving it; the whole body is perceiving.
Mm.
And
Oh,
I think it's because we've had a body, millions of years longer than we've had a human brain. By working on the body, you activate um, all the senses which are contained in the body, which are, as far as we can see, most of the senses which control how we feel rather than how we think. And it's feelings which make us happy or unhappy. So we feel in love, we feel fear, we feel satisfied. We don't think
yes.
we don't think satisfied. We don't think fear. We feel them, and feelings are in the body, not in the brain.
Yes, I agree. It's so interesting. And we are most of the time in our brain thinking, overthinking. And one of the biggest thing, I think, if you're going to work with yourself, is to get down to the body. And when you're there and you start to feel, you start to sleep better, your anxious, or sorry, your stress levels goes down. It's like we have forgotten our body too much.
I think that's right.
Mm,
We are creatures of mind and body, and the body is at least as important as the mind. And as I
mm,
say, in terms of contentedness and happiness,
mm.
actually the body is more important.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I don't think people realize that actually. Uh, I have that realization when I went to um, I got massage, and I had she was very into chakra. She really helped me to connect with my body in a way that
Mm,
I couldn't do through yoga, and sometimes you need help from someone else.
sure.
I read you spent the time at Vipassana and also with the Buddhist, sorry, with the
Bardic.
Buddhist monks.
Uh-huh.
Mm,
Yeah, I mean, I've studied in various traditions over the decades,
uh-huh. So
Buddhist
interesting.
traditions, Sufi traditions, more recently the Druidic
Mm.
traditions, which are
Oh,
which are indigenous to the European lands. My DNA is very much Northern European, quite a lot of Neanderthal actually as well in my DNA, which is I like. Um, but yeah, the central message to all meditation systems is the ability to notice how you're feeling, to know thyself, as the Greeks would have put it. And whatever system you're attracted to, that you can practice within, because practice ultimately is the thing that's going to make the difference. They're all the message is the same, which is
yeah.
know yourself, do no harm, and love the world and love everything in
Mm.
it. So, I mean, that's the message that all traditions really espouse.
But how come your mother and father they encourage meditation? They were quite early adapters, or maybe not. We've been doing this for years, but if you know what I mean, my father never taught me anything like that.
Well, no, certainly it was unusual for
Ah,
them. My
mm,
parents were part of an early Gurdjieff group in the 50s, attracted to Sufism and Buddhism, like I say. My dad was a
ah,
Catholic, which also informed what he did. So yeah, I think it was unusual.
mm,
And so I was exposed to that, and also what we used to call alternative medicine. So that's how we were brought up as children, on a more whole grain diet, and natural medicines, etc., herbs and Bach flower remedies and homeopathic remedies, etc. Those were kind of the standard things at home. And yes, absolutely, they were early adopters in that
mm.
sense, and they were doing these kind of philosophies and practice a long time before most people, before they became popular, certainly.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Um, and when did you start Sensate?
So I had this, there was a specific occasion. So I had a patient cancellation. I was using the sound technology that I developed at that time, which was built into the couch, and with
Hmm.
a product that we
Okay.
were using. So I was using that to meditate. I used to love it when patients cancelled. It gave me the opportunity to do that. And I had this kind of this whole sort of eureka vision, if you like, was downloaded in an instant, including the blueprints and everything, and how the concept could work. And I realized that you could get rid of most of the hardware by turning the body into the instrument. So whereas before I'd been using, big sound transducers to try and convey frequency and vibration through the body from the back with the person lying down, I realized that you could use a much smaller technology, and this is the Sensate device,
Yeah.
by placing it on the chest, and using bone conduction, which prior to our patent was only used really for headphones. You could use bone conduction to convey low frequencies, infrasonic frequencies, into the chest, where there is a lot of air. There's a lot of air in the chest. There's the lungs, the heart, the above the diaphragmatic space. There's a lot of hollow space above the diaphragm. And a bit like a speaker cabinet, if you think about your speaker cabinets, if you just have a beautiful speaker and you put it on the table, it's not going to sound good. It sounds
No.
good because you've got it in a hollow space. And that's what creates the resonance and funnels the sound out. And your chest is just like that. So you can either make it resonate from your voice box if you know how to produce the right frequencies. And the idea of Sensate is you don't even have to do that. You can just pop it on your chest and it creates the frequencies within the chest for you.
Mm. So it's like a 10 minutes. You get. I used it, and I use it once a week. I use it actually
Okay.
because I have my breath work and I meditate and stuff like that. But I have had problem driving the car because I was in not in an accident, but sort of, and I got afraid. So I
Right.
was so tense, and I need to drive my car. I drive my daughter to her horses, and I have been so afraid of doing that every week. So
Mm.
someone told me about your product, and I got it, and I have had it every time. And my daughter's like, "Have you got that thing with you?" And she's actually turning it on for me, and it helps. In the beginning, actually, I was that afraid that we also sang and we also did like
Mm.
because to be able to relax. But now I'm doing okay, but I still have it with me every time because it helps me when I and also it helps me when I'm not really in my comfort zone, when I'm going further and further and further in my driving. Oh,
That's
thank
what.
you for that.
Oh well, you're so welcome. That's a wonderful story. I'm so pleased to hear that. And this actually is a really interesting example of how trauma and stress affects the lives of the people around us. So
Yeah.
of course, it can blight our own lives, and there's many
Mm,
examples of overwhelming experience that people receive. But it also affects the lives of the people around us. And one of my favorite sensate testimonials was from an American Iraqi war veteran
oh,
who hadn't left the house in 5 years because of his post-traumatic stress disorder.
oj.
And he wrote to us a week after using Sensate and said for the first time in 5 years he'd been out for a meal with his family.
Oh, ja.
Which is so lovely. So that, obviously he's feeling better, but all those members of his family, of course, are being included
Yeah.
in that comfort zone. I mean, the thing about sound and also toning nerves is that it's different from toning muscles. So, when you exercise, by the time you've left the gym, your muscles are already weakening. But
Yeah.
with nerves, it's different because what
Mm,
from when you repeat a pattern of behavior, you
Mm.
lay down neurons in a particular neural network. And the more neurons you lay down in that network, the more powerful it becomes. So
Mm.
although there is a very powerful instant impact from using Sensate, and most people feel very different after the first 10-minute session, there is also a cumulative benefit as well, because each time you do it, you increase the neural network around the relaxation response.
Yeah, it is. It's lovely, and I can imagine people having problem meditating. It's easier because you get something with you which calms you down. But in my case, it's been so necessary because the first times after the accident, I I was like feeling that all the cars are driving into me, but
Mm.
but I need to do it. I didn't want it to stop my daughter from coming to the horse she take care of. So
Well,
it's
yeah,
cool.
I mean, obviously, not everybody has PTSD, post-traumatic stress
No,
disorder, but I do actually genuinely believe that almost everybody has some form of trauma. And what's frequently missed is what's called generational or ancestral trauma. So
sure.
a lot of people don't, they feel wrong in some way,
Mm,
they feel ill in some way, and they're really puzzled by it because they can't work out why they feel like this.
mm,
And my conclusion now, after looking at this carefully, is that it's because it's not to do with them.
no,
This is generational trauma from ancestors, which is, you know, not that. I mean, we know this scientifically that trauma is actually passed down through 7 generations on the female side. I'm sure it's passed down through the men as well, but the research has been done on women. Um,
that's not often. It's
yeah,
not often that we're in. Often they do it on men, so it's nice to hear.
well, that's actually a really good point. I was talking about that at the Medical Longevity Conference last weekend. Is how, yeah, medical research overdiagnoses women
Mm,
and women in general, women of color in particular, and most of the research is done on kind of middle-aged white men, and most of the drug dosing and recommendations are based on that as well. So
yeah.
there is a whole issue there. But you know, given that you'd be very hard pressed to find a population anywhere that hasn't been subject to invasion or war or starvation or colonization or slavery. You know, there are no populations that haven't been traumatized.
Mm, mm. No, 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 and no, no. So it's not that strange that people is having problems
It's
to
not.
with their stress levels and also when we're in the middle of this digital uh, mess, sort of. It's we need something to connect to, as you said earlier. We need to take care of ourselves every day. Um,
And yeah, and there's no substitute for nature. Um, I mean, I really strongly recommend that people get into nature as often as possible. The research around that is very positive. You know, it's, you know, you need to try and spend 2 or 3 hours a week in nature. But certainly having natural elements in your house, even if it's only a tree that you can look at across the room, or listening to nature sounds, is critical.
yeah, 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 and so have you? Is it just not just? Is it this product you have, or is there? Or are there more to come? Are you developing this?
Yeah, we're not stuck in the product cycle that a lot of companies are. They have to release a new model every year or so. because they have to sell new devices.
Mm.
We because it actually works so well, we're committed to a kind of a process of improvement of the device itself, but particularly the app. Every month we release two new soundscapes so that people can, with different themes and different seasonal content, for people that subscribe to the app. The basic app is free, so once you've bought the device, you've got an app for free for life. But if you want lots of new material, then you can subscribe, and that gives you access to the full catalog as well, which some
Mm.
people like. Some people just listen to the same track every time. Some people do it once a week, like you. Some people do it once a day. Some people do it several times a day. But user behavior is quite varied. But we do find, we've got people who have been using Sensate for years, and have, and actually have ended up buying ones for their family because their family they don't want to have to fight for their family over using it. So we of course do have other products in mind. I can't really talk about those because they're in development, but um, we don't have to do that from a product life cycle point of view. Because the basic product itself does what it says on the tin. It works incredibly well.
Hmm. So cool. And we have been talking about a few things, but in today's world, the stress levels are very high. In your opinion, what do you think is the reason for chronic stress?
Um, so as I say, the rate of technological change is
Yeah.
is exponential. So exponential is this word that means it's increasing at its own rate of increase.
Mm.
Whereas biological adaptation isn't. So although it's not linear, it can go in spurts, and it does, and there's plenty of examples of this. It can't keep up with the rate of technology change. So we're constantly feeling, and this is only getting more and more so, that we are, at the mercy of or lagging behind technology. And with the advent of things like AI in particular, that's increasing that feeling also. I think the other big factor is climate anxiety, which is a
Yeah.
huge, huge problem. It's people don't always talk about it, but actually, most people, certainly anyone that's paying attention, is naturally anxious about what the world might look like in 5, 10, 50, 20 years.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge underlying stress for a lot of people.
Mm. Exactly. Something you don't realize and admit to yourself every day, but it's just there and you try to push it away, sort of. Many people
Yeah.
do.
And I think, in a way, the climate change movement has done a very good job of making people anxious. Um,
Mm.
uh, but now the job is to make people understand that change is possible.
Mm.
So speaking to a lot of younger people, they don't say this, but when you drill down into what they're thinking and feeling, a lot of them actually basically believe that there's nothing they can do. It's all over. It's only a matter of time until
Mm.
things go wrong, and that they have no future. So they're thinking, well, there's no point in my doing anything because it's too late. So I think now the emphasis needs to be on, yeah, there's some real problems here, but there are still massive changes that are possible, and that's where we need to
Mm.
direct our efforts.
Exactly. Exactly. So what are you doing every day for yourself to feel better?
Well, nature for me is incredibly important. Um,
Mm.
so I like to spend as much time in nature as possible. I like to try and notice the seasons. So, for instance, tonight is the hunter's full moon.
Mm.
It's the largest full moon of the year, and as I mentioned, I sort of work partly within a kind of druidic tradition, and my DNA is very much from Europe and Northern Europe, England in particular, and there's a very powerful tradition going back pre-Roman times, of honoring the seasons, honoring the change of seasons, what's called the wheel of the year. Noticing the solstice, the equinox, noticing the full moon, and particular
What?
ceremonies that one can do around those times.
Yes, and what are you doing? What kind of ceremony do you have? Inspire us.
So this full moon in particular, I'd really encourage people to go out and have a look at it. Yeah, so there's the idea of moon gazing, depending obviously on how clear the night is. The moon's going to be big. It's going to be nice and silver and bright. So maybe take a blanket, maybe go outside, maybe be somewhere where you can sit and meditate and relax and just communicate with the moon. Try and get,
Oh,
allow the moonlight to fall on you. Try and get some sense of connection with the moon. It's a very different energy to sun energy. Interesting little fact: moon shadow is actually warmer than moonlight. There are various reasons for this, which I won't go into, but it's an interesting little aside that tells you something about the nature of moonlight. And you can even take a question with you. We all have a burning question, don't we? Which we may have well formulated in our minds. Why does this keep on happening? How do I get this? I mean, don't ask for material things, but ask for clarity about
yeah.
the meaning and purpose that your life may hold for you or for your family. So you can take a question also and just reflect on that as you're reflected in the light of the moon, and just sit with the moon for a period. Some people might hold an all-night visual, but that isn't necessary. That isn't necessary for most of us. And maybe go for a moonlight walk as well. I mean, if you're going to go for a moonlight walk, this is the full moons are the best opportunity, and the world is a very different place at night.
Since I started with breath work, actually, that's now my way to connect with myself. But it has also become a way to connect with nature. I see the nature so much clearly since I started with this. It's like the flowers are much prettier, and that I feel like I'm more one with the nature, actually. That is one of the benefits, and it's so nice.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. When we're over adrenalized, when we're in a kind of a flight or fight emergency response, the whole nature of that experience is that we don't notice beauty, and we don't experience awe because we're locked in fear. So it's all about heightening the senses for negative movement
Yeah.
and sound, so that you can perform an action. But when you relax and you move into that rest and digest, that tend and befriend response, you have the opportunity to notice, as you say, the beauty around you, and to connect
Yeah.
with the oneness of yourself and nature and everybody else. And Professor Dacher Keltner at Berkeley has written particularly about the benefits of awe, AWE, awe. So an awesome experience, and how it has a particular impact on promoting vagal nerve tone. And the most reliable place that we can experience awe is in nature. I mean, people might experience awe at the birth of a child, or other major events, or maybe their football team winning. But these are rare events. If you're an England fan, they're incredibly rare events because England doesn't do very well at the football very often. But
No, they park the bus. They don't do much thing.
no, they don't.
No.
But nature, there is always awe
Yeah.
in nature if you can see it.
Mm, mm. It's fantastic. Have you got any more? What do you call it? And now my brain gets tired. But what are you do every day? What are you doing every day? I mean, the moon is just for today and then next month. But what are you doing every day for yourself?
Well, of course, I use Sensate every day.
Yeah.
Even though I'm an experienced meditator, I'm busy as well. I'm as you know, I'm as prone to the busy disease as anybody. So if I can get those kind of relaxation benefits in 10 minutes rather than half an hour, then that's good. I like that. I have a breathwork practice. I have a movement practice that I
Mm,
do. And I try to take an active part in communities that I'm involved with. So human beings are also communal creatures. There are people. I mean, I do quite well on my own.
mm,
I quite like solitude, and actually, we all need solitude more and silence more than we tend to think. But for most people, need to have. Well, we all need to have connection with something. That can mean people, it can mean nature, it can mean animals. But without that essential connection to something else other than ourselves, then of course we tend to focus in on ourselves too much. So it's important to take our consciousness, our awareness outside of just ourselves.
yeah. Cannot agree more. It's so important when we don't have connection with ourselves and with others. Burnout are very near because we get more as uh, um, we get more mechanic, just doing things on a schedule instead of having connection, and perhaps we're not connected with our bodies as well.
Exactly. So adrenaline isn't was never designed to be a daily stimulus. It's not like coffee.
Mm, mm,
And I think one of the problems with any drug, whether that's one you take or one that's produced by your own body, is you become used to it, and the dose you need to get the same response goes up. So a lot of people are running on adrenaline.
yeah.
That's how they get through the day. And of course, then what those people notice is when they try to relax, is they fall asleep, which is good. That's what their body needs. But because they're so convinced that they need to keep going, they think that's a bad thing. But it's a great thing. We need, we know that sleep and deep rest
Mm,
is essential for function. Um, so burnout happens when we're just simply using too much adrenaline, and that will then dysregulate cortisol, and sleep patterns
yeah.
become disrupted, and we need to use stimulants to keep going, etc. So
Yeah.
yeah, so relaxation is also the antidote to burnout.
Yeah. Or if the listeners want to get in contact with Sensate, or want to, I don't know if you're on social media, are you?
Yeah, there's Sensate on Facebook and on Instagram, of
Mm,
course. Yeah.
mm, mm.
There, people are very welcome to send any questions to info@getsensate.com. That's info@getsensate.com. You can maybe add that to the show notes.
Yeah, I have that in the show notes.
And if it's a question specifically for me, just put that in and they'll send it on.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. It's been fantastic to listen to you, and I think I could continue listening because I can tell that you have a lot of experience and knowledge about what I think is the most interesting. But so thank you very much for taking your time, and thank you for helping me driving.
Well, thank you for asking me, and it's my great pleasure to be of help in any way
Yeah.
that I can.
Take care and good luck with your future and with Sensate.
Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you. So, thank you. And it's been fantastic to hear you speak
Oh,
about this.
thank you so much.
Uh, are you yourself on Instagram, or no? You're
I,
not.
I'm not on Instagram.
No.
I am on Facebook.
Ah,
Um,
okay. I will. connect with you there.
Yeah. So
Uh,
and I have I do a lot of nature connections. So I've also so there's a Nature Awaken Facebook, and there's a Stefan Chemlik Facebook.
okay.
But
I
yeah,
will
but
find you.
put my name in and you'll find me. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Good luck with your business and everything.
Oh well, thank you as well,
Mm,
and
mm.
good luck with the podcast. I hope it continues to grow and do great work.
Yeah, I think so.
Excellent.
uh,
And
Thank you.
yeah, and let me and Michelle know when it's finished so we can promote it as well.
Yeah, I will.
Okay, very good. All right, you take care. Bye.
Men hjälp har jag inte sparat.